Chapter 13. The water felt awfully good. I would have liked to have had just soaked and swum, but there was no time. We had less than 3 hours before Mom got home. I sat on my inner tube, paddling frantically with both hands. Jack floated behind his, kicking with his feet. On top of his tube, held in place with twine, was a canvas sack, oiled to make it waterproof, that contained the box of cigars. We hoped it could withstand a dunking without water seeping through and destroying the contents. I wasn't so sure that 3 hours would give us long enough to get in and back before Mom arrived home from work, but Jack said that was plenty of time. Either we'd be caught and it would be over, or we'd get in quickly and perhaps somebody would drive us home. And even if we were an hour or so late, we could just tell Mom we were out playing and lost track of time. I'm not so sure this will work, I told him. Won't they be expecting us to come in this way because we did it before? First off, we have the element of surprise. Second, we're going in a different way. How do you figure that? We'll keep floating down the creek until we hit the lake. What good will that do? Won't they be able to see us bobbing up and down on the water? Don't you remember anything that Mr. Granger told us in the car? Some things. Jack shook his head. He said there's a marsh at the end of the creek and then high cliffs along part of the lake. First we'll be hidden by the reeds and then by the cliffs. But if there are cliffs, how do we get up to the buildings? We climb. Up the cliffs? We'll just look for the right spot. It won't be that hard. At least I don't think it will. Then again, maybe we should try to come in through the marsh. We'll just sort of play it by ear. That wasn't the reassurance I was looking for. I'd hoped he'd had some sort of master plan in mind. The creek cut through a grove of trees, and the branches on both sides reached above the water and formed a canopy over our heads. I stopped paddling and looked up. Little bits of blue and stripes of sunshine broke through. I liked it there. I felt protected and secret, as if it was a little hiding spot instead of out in the open. It would have been so nice to have just stayed there. Hurry up, Jack yelled back over his shoulder. I dug in my hands and started paddling again. We rounded a bend in the creek. Up ahead, I could see the big willow and then the trestle beyond that. I paddled harder with my left hand to push the tube out more into the center of the stream. I wanted to go through the middle span of the trestle again. I looked up at the bridge. There was nothing there. Nobody. Then I scanned the bank of the creek as far along as I could see. Again, nothing that I could see, but there were hundreds of places somebody could have been sitting, watching us. We were completely exposed. It would have been different if we'd come at night, but there was no way I was ever coming here at night, so that didn't matter. I tilted my head back as I neared the trestle. It looked higher and higher the closer I got. Finally, I bent my head right back and watched the bridge float by above my head until I popped out the other side. First Jack and then I passed by the spot where we'd brought the tubes in before. Everything from there on was new. The creek cut sharply to the left and then almost immediately to the right. I anxiously scanned the banks of the creek, first one side and then the other. I couldn't see anybody. I looked up ahead. Jack was almost out of sight. I began to paddle furiously to try to close the gap. Despite my efforts, it seemed as if Jack was pulling away, picking up speed. I dug in deeper to try to get closer. He was moving fast. We were both moving fast. The banks of the creek seemed to be closing in, and the current was picking up speed. Suddenly, the stream dipped down, and I felt myself thrown forward. I grabbed on tight, then it dipped again. But this time, I was ready. Stretching ahead were a series of dips and rocks and whitewater. I had a rush of fear that matched the rush of water around me. I wanted to try to get to the side of the creek, get out of the flow, but I couldn't let Jack get away. He was at the very end of a long, straight section being towed behind his tube. As long as I could keep him in sight, I'd be... He disappeared from view. Had the creek cut to the side? Or had he... Oh my God. Ah! I screamed as I shot off into space and then plunged down head first, still clinging to the tube with one hand. I dropped beneath the water and my grip on the tube pulled me back to the surface. I looked back. I'd just come over a waterfall. It had to be more than 6 feet high. I turned back around. Jack was standing in shallow water off to the side. He was holding his punctured inner tube, or what was left of it, in one hand. "Are you okay?" I yelled. "Be quiet," he hissed. I swam over to him, pulling my tube behind me. Jack was now sitting on the shore. The bottom rose up quickly, making it shallow enough for me to put my feet down. As I waded in, Jack untied the oiled sack from the remains of the tube. He opened up the flap and turned the bag upside down. Water poured out. "I'd be afraid to look inside," I said. "I'm not going to," Jack muttered. "We promised we'd delivered them. We didn't promise what shape they'd be in when they got there." "What are we going to do now?" I asked. "We still go down the creek? Are you going to share my tube?" "Not much choice." Jack slipped the box of cigars back into the oiled bag. Not that it really mattered much now. He then took the twine and tied it around the tube. "You climb back in," he said, "and I'll hang on to the back." Jack steadied the tube while I climbed onto it. He pushed us back into the middle and we started to move. There didn't seem to be much current. The waterfall drained into a large pool and the creek was much wider after that. Keep your eyes open, Jack said. One waterfall was one more than I ever wanted to go over. I hadn't even thought about that. Quickly, the bushes and trees on the banks became sparse and then vanished completely. In their place, bulrushes and marsh grass rose up on both sides of us. Jack continued to kick, pushing us forward slowly. Up ahead, there were a number of channels cutting through the growth. Which way do we go? I asked. We go to the left. That's the closest to the camp. We drifted down the channel, closed in on all sides. We were moving even more slowly now. Is there any current at all? I asked. Not much. Climb off and help me kick. Reluctantly, I slid off and into the water. It didn't look particularly clean, but it certainly felt warm. I joined Jack and started to kick my feet. Slowly, we moved forward. I can touch, Jack said. He stood up and the water was below his waist. I set my feet down. It was soggy and I sank slightly into the muddy bottom. Good thing I was wearing my shoes. Gradually, the reeds gave way as the water got shallower and shallower. Finally, Jack picked up the tube and carried it under his arm. We climbed up a sandy slope and out of the water. I slumped to the ground and Jack plopped down beside me. Up ahead, there were a few trees and some shrubs that blocked our view. They also blocked anyone's view of us. We'll leave the tube right here and walk in, Jack said. What I really wanted to do was just stay on there on the sand, at least for a while. I wanted to dry out and rest, but I knew we didn't have time to stop. I trailed behind Jack as he moved into the trees. At least there was more cover there. I'm trying to picture where the buildings are from here, Jack said. They're more on the other side of the property, but the stream cut in sharper than I thought it was going to. I don't think the trees go on much further, I said. Slowly we crept to the edge of the cover. Hiding behind a bush, we looked out. There was a large, empty, open field stretching out in front of us. In the distance, directly across were the buildings. We weren't as far away as we'd thought. We're practically there, Jack said. Practically and there are two different things. What now? I asked. We can follow the trees and try to go around, Jack suggested. I looked first in one direction and then the others. Off to one side, way in the distance, trees ringed the meadow. Can we still do that and still get home in time? I asked. Jack shook his head. Probably not. Do you see anybody? Nobody. Why? I was just thinking. Not about making a run for it, I hope. It wouldn't take us more than 60 seconds if we ran flat out, twice as long as if we sort of trotted. Let's try it. Jack, we really shouldn't do... Before I could finish, Jack had jumped up and started to jog across the field. I had no choice. I burst out of the bushes after him. I swiveled my head from side to side. There was nobody in sight. Maybe we could make it. I came alongside Jack. The buildings were getting closer and closer. I started to pump my legs faster, trying to move more quickly, and pulled slightly ahead of my brother. Shoot, Jack said as he grabbed my arm and forcibly pulled me to a stop. What's wrong? I sputtered before I saw the answer in the distance. A jeep had popped out from a gap between the trees and was moving along the edge of the field. We lose, Jack said. There's no way they can miss seeing us. I guess you're... Hold on. Maybe they should see us, I said. Hey, I yelled, waving my hands in the air. Over here! Jack grabbed me by the arm and spun me around. What are you doing? I shook off his hand, making sure they see us. Hey, over here! The men in the jeep had now altered their course and were coming right for us. We still had a chance, Jack had said sullenly as the jeep closed in. We could have made a break for it, or there was no way they would have missed us. Just shut up and let me do the talking this time. Don't you tell me to shut up, he snapped. And what do you mean, let you do the talking? Shut up, I repeated. I have a plan. My brother looked as if he was going to take a swing at me, but he buttoned his lip. The jeep rumbled toward us. There were two soldiers, a driver, and another man in the passenger seat. Now remember, keep your trap shut, I hissed at him as the jeep pulled to a stop beside us. Hi, guys, I called out. I recognized both of them from different times we'd been caught. We're looking for Bill. Have you seen him? Not for a while, one of them answered. The lieutenant colonel asked us to deliver this to Bill, I said, taking the box from my brother's hand. We were told it was important and that he'd either be at the beach or over by the farmhouse. What's in the package? The other soldier asked. I shrugged. We're just delivery boys. They don't tell us what we're delivering. He just said it was important. Do you think you could give us a lift to the farmhouse? We're going that way anyway. Jump in, the driver offered. Smooth, Jack whispered to me as we circled around to the back and climbed in. The jeep started up and tightly turned to head toward the buildings. The passenger turned around in his seat. I didn't expect to see you boys here again, he yelled so his voice could be heard over the engine and the rushing air. They have us doing lots of different things, Jack yelled back. You'd be surprised what we're up to. The jeep bumped across the field until it hit a gravel road at the edge. The tires bit into the gravel as we sped along, but the driver slowed down as we passed by the first building. I saw the farmhouse right up ahead. You're in luck, boys. There's Bill, the driver called out. I stood slightly up and peered between the two men. There was Bill standing with the lieutenant colonel and another man. The Jeep skidded to a stop right in front of them. "Thanks for the ride," I said to the men as I leaped over the side of the Jeep. "No problem," one of them called back. I looked up at Bill. He looked as if he'd seen a ghost. "Here are your cigars," I said as I handed him the box. "They might be a little wet." "Maybe you can give them back to Mr. Granger to pay off your end of the bet," Jack suggested. Bill stood there silent, his mouth open. The lieutenant colonel looked just as shocked. "Perhaps somebody would be so good as to explain this to me," the man beside them said. "Inside, now, in private."